if you step out on stage or in front of 500,000 people on a webinar, which is the craziest sentence I've ever said, if you step out on stage in front of 500,000 people and you've done absolutely everything, there's nothing to fear.
And that's why it's not about what everyone else will think, because when I'm on stage making that presentation, the only person whose voice I'll hear is mine. And I will know if I have done everything in my control to be prepared or not.
And what's the best thing that comes out? I didn't do everything that I could to prepare, and I managed to fluke my performance.
Right.
I managed to like close my eyes, throw the dart, and oh wow, it hit the bullseye. You'll even know that. There'll even be guilt. You won't even be able to fully enjoy your success.
And that's it.
Because you'll have tarnished it with your lack of input.
And what's interesting is that when you start defining your own success that way, it actually starts to feel under your own control. But the downside is you realize that you can do very few things. And then all of a sudden life feels very short because you're like, shoot, there's like not that many things I can do before I die if I'm going to actually do my best. And what was interesting is I was talking to a CEO friend of mine. He's a public CEO. And he was like, I need to start making content, right? I'm like, dude, you're like managing $1 billion company. I was like, you're doing okay, man. But because of that type of person, he's like, I need to be doing better with my content, right? He's got a few 100,000 followers anyways. And so I was like, all right, well, how many pieces of content you putting out a week? And he was like, well, I mean, I put out one a day. And I was like, dude, we put out 300 a week. And he didn't even respond. He just like pursed his lips and nodded. He was like, thank you for resetting my minimum standard. That's all he's like, thank you for like, and I'm sure like when you talk to Phil Heath and he talks about the volume that is required in order to gain muscle and how dialed in he is with food and all the other things. Just the amount of sheer work, like the biggest change biggest reason that I've had significantly larger returns or outcomes that have happened later on in my career, and they continue to get bigger and bigger, is because the minimum standard for how much work I know I can do on something has multiplied 100-fold. Like I look at the first presentations, I was telling Quinn this earlier, I look at the first presentations I ever gave. And I remember thinking to myself when I had this, I was like, this is a good presentation. And it's like 25 slides with like a heading and like 3 bullets on each slide and being like, man, this is good. I'm like, this is a pittance. This is like an afternoon. But in my mind, if I spent a whole day on something, that was like a lot of work. Now I like using this term like measure in hundreds, which is like measure in hundreds of hours. How many hundreds of hours have you put towards something? If you do that, I promise you the thing that you're making will get a lot better. And you'll also see how much more you're capable of, which is what I think, like my undertone of listening to what you were just saying with the podcast is like, the more you do, the more you realize you can do. And so what happens is you're actually, even though you're going pro right now, you're like, dude, next year I'm going pro.
Yeah.
Because this is now just a minimum standard. Of course I work out 3 days a week. Of course I do 3 podcasts a week. But dude, once we have the reality TV show and we have the full crew and we have the headquarters, like, because then the path gets lit of where you're going to go because you're so singularly focused and you have no other distractions. The attention cost you're not paying that down anymore. And you're just like, how many times can I repeat this effort? And then that's when you start unlocking mastery, right? Like, I have this process for creating presentations, and before we turned on the mics, we were talking about it, but it's like, I've done a handful of presentations in my life and I've gotten decent at making them, but the process now is so refined, which is like, it is game tape. It is, I make the thing, I do the thing in my head, I do it out loud, I watch the recording, I edit the thing, I do it in my head, I do it out loud, I watch the recording, I edit the thing, and I just keep doing it until it's glass.
Dude, I listened to every podcast that I did for probably the first 2.5 years. I listened back every single time. But at the time I didn't cringe because I thought that you crushed it. Anybody can go back and listen to episode 1 with Stuart Morton in my old office in Newcastle upon Tyne, and you'll notice every other sentence that he says, I go, It's fucking infuriating. Yeah. It's absolutely catastrophic. My accent's terrible. Everything about it is awful. And yet, at the time, I thought it was great. Here's another interesting thing I've been thinking about recently. When you don't have anything to say no to, it's easy to focus on one thing. As success begins to get you more opportunities, your ability to say no becomes increasingly important. And that's something that I'm feeling now.
Yeah.